You don't need to leave this open. And with the bar across there. I have a key.
This meeting is being recorded.
Let's start. All right. I call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of Thursday, September 22nd, 2022. It's 6 p.m. And present we have Kathy, Angela on Zoom, Todd, Charles, and myself. So there we are. All right. So the first item is sorry, present from staff. We have Jonna, Phil, and Piper. And from council, we have Adrian Christie on Zoom.
And Allie's on Zoom.
Who else? I'm sorry.
Our lawyer.
Oh, Allie's on Zoom too.
Yeah.
Great. I just didn't see her. I see people. Great. So the first thing is approval of the minutes. We have the special PZ meeting minutes dated June 30th, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the June 30th, 2022 minutes as presented.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Angela. Any discussion? Nope, seeing none. All in favor, raise your hand. Great, that's unanimous. We also have the P&Z meeting minutes dated August 29th. Anybody like to make a motion?
I move to approve the August 29th, 2022 minutes as presented.
Todd seconds.
Any discussion? Nope. All in favor, raise your hand. Yes, good. All right, that's unanimous. So the next item on the agenda is election of the chair and vice chair. I've talked to Kathy, and we would both like to continue, but I will also entertain. We have to be nominated, but I'll also entertain any other nominations. Are there any other nominations?
I was going to volunteer, but since you're willing to keep on going, I move to elect Lenny Constantine as chairperson and Kathy Green as vice chairperson of P&Z.
I'll second.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Todd. Is there any discussion?
What's your speech? Come on.
Well, I'll just say briefly that I think we're in the middle of a really important long-term effort with the master plan, that we have a really good working relationship here among all of us. And I would like to continue to lead that effort at least until that's done.
I agree. I agree totally.
All right, so let's proceed to a vote. All in favor? You can vote for yourself. That looks like that's unanimous. All right, thank you, everybody. We'll do our best to do a good job on this. Are there any staff announcements?
None at this time, no.
I think you should make a formal announcement about your honeymoon. That's exciting.
Well, now that it's on the record, I'll be out for the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
Back the week of October 10th. Ron should be back in the office on Tuesday. He's out until Tuesday.
Okay, that's great.
Struggle along with that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's been deferred for 3 years due to COVID.
Yeah.
Way overdue. Yeah. Are there any public, Piper? I don't see them.
We'll call for them to raise their hand.
All right. Okay, great. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Please use the raise your hand feature to indicate you would like to provide comment.
I see none.
Thank you, Piper. All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to our first item of business, which is our work session. Jenna, would you like to take this away? Jenna, sorry.
Yes, I will. Thank you, P&Z, for letting me present this work session to you this evening. Typically, it would be Phil or Ron presenting land use code amendments to you, but because these are so HARC-centric, I've been doing most of the work on them, and I'm happy to go through them with you. So this is a work session to discuss amendments to the HARC classification of applications. and HARC reviews and recommendations. We did discuss this at HARC quite extensively last night. These are just work sessions. Once we get your input, we will likely come back with the for a formal review and recommendation next month at the HARC and P&Z meetings, and then proceed to council. So that's the next steps. But up until now, we've had 2 work sessions with town council, one on August 23rd and one on September 13th. And they directed staff to proceed with the changes and have asked HARC and P&Z to weigh in on some specific items that I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. The intent of these changes is to better streamline the HARC review process. After several years of working with these land use code sections review, it seems that we can make it better and more efficient for the HARC board, for the applicants, and for staff. So I'm going to start we're going to ease into it. I'm going to start with the easiest parts first, I think, hopefully, and that is the HARC reviews and recommendations. So the land use code currently requires HARC to make reviews and recommendations, usually to P&Z, on zoning amendments, land use code text amendments, such as we're talking about tonight, preliminary, large scale and small scale subdivisions, preliminary, large and small scale PUDs, and minor scale subdivisions, which are reviewed by the chair. So I know you've had numerous joint work sessions and meetings with HARC, usually for these types of things. And perhaps you've noticed that HARC really struggles with these reviews and recommendations. There are no criteria specific to HARC to make recommendations on most of these things. They often ask why they're being asked to review them. And so the recommendation would be to keep the reviews and recommendations for the zoning amendments and land use code text amendments for those things inside the historic district, but to eliminate reviews and recommendations of preliminary, large scale and small scale subdivisions, preliminary, large and small scale PUDs, and minor scale subdivisions. And the preliminary large scale PUD is highlighted because we've had some back and forth on this with town council members and with HARC last night. HARC has expressed a desire to retain some ability to review large scale PUDs, mostly as a preemptive way to provide input or set expectations on large developments that they know are coming to them eventually, but before they get to HARC. Town council has recommended that HARC be consulted before the preliminary stage, perhaps at conceptual or even at a work session. We've discussed this amongst staff, and our recommendation is that staff would encourage applicants to do a work session with HARC and P&Z for large-scale PUDs, especially for those in the historic district, or those even outside the historic district that would affect the dimensional limitations of a project that HARC would have input on. And so HARC seemed to be happy with that. So I'd like to have your feedback on that idea as well. I don't know that we would require work sessions. I suppose we could, but the feedback from HARC was that staff would be in the position to encourage them for things that HARC should provide input on.
Can you talk a little bit about the rationale for some of these changes?
Sure. As I mentioned, subdivisions and PUDs do not provide criteria for HARC review. HARC is asked to provide input on things that they are usually told not to talk about. Yeah. Parking, other variances, anything other than height or setbacks, really, HARC should never talk about. Uses, they're not supposed to talk about. So in these cases, we say, well, put that aside and now we want you to talk about them. It's confusing for them and they don't have any clear criteria for HARC review.
Well, that makes sense to me, but when we're looking at some of these things like zoning amendments,
And
don't those ask,
those we would keep. Zoning amendments.
I understand, but don't those ask HARC to talk about exactly uses and things like that they are not supposed to talk about?
In the, within the historic district.
So it should say zoning amendments in the historic district?
I think, well, it's not specifically, I guess I was talking about land use code amendments. Within the historic district. Zoning amendments are rare. We did talk about removing those as well. Trying to think of an example.
Not car hinge, but lot L parking structure might be something where there would be a future zoning change to allow greater density or greater height or whatever.
It's so rare.
It's
very rare.
really rare, but
Yeah.
in trying to streamline things and make them easier for everybody to understand, do we want HARC weighing in on those things? Particularly since, at least in the last decade, they've tended to go off topic and
I completely agree. I mean, when we started talking about this, I don't know if you were here, John, I said, I think the division is, we talk about uses and HARC should not.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that they talk
Exactly. And
about.
it's confusing for them because we ask them to in certain circumstances, but otherwise they shouldn't. So as far as zoning amendments, one example would be the zoning also sets the dimensional limitations on projects. So that is height, setbacks, floor area, site coverage, etc. So in that way, HARC would be interested.
Kathy?
I remember from the mid-80s, the whole subdivision that forced the park reviews, but we had a much smaller staff then, so they were kind of overwhelmed, and I think we have grown through that stage, and I think we won't go there again. I know that when I've been doing the chairperson reviews, if I'm uncomfortable, I can bump it up. I don't know if staff can meet and say, this one's really complicated and we'd like to have HARC involved more in the review, but I think a work session would be great. You know, what we did accidentally in the mid-80s is we created lots that once you did the wetlands, whatever, we weren't left with a footprint big enough to really build a house unless you went extra tall. And so we were suddenly in conflict, you know, because we hadn't connected all the dots that, you know, we should have done fewer lots despite what the applicant wanted, So I'm very comfortable with this. And I guess if everybody doesn't know what HARC's on an 8 or 9 month lead time, or
We are.
yeah. So trying to bring the lead time down, which I think is important for applicants, but I also think it's important that the people serving on HARC can be done at 9 or 10 at night instead of midnight. And anyone who's gone to the chair meetings, they're usually pretty simple, pretty fast, and there's certainly the opportunity to bump something up to a higher level of review.
Exactly.
And on these, I think this is fine.
And that's true of all of these items, that anything can be elevated by the director or the chair. As far as subdivisions, what we find nowadays is that there are specific criteria for subdivisions that have to be met, and if they're met, then they should be approved. So there's nothing much for HARC to weigh in on.
Right.
Todd?
The idea of an optional or voluntary work session is going to beg the question, do we need to have one or not? And how does staff feel about that? I'd kind of like it to be either you shall or leave it silent rather
Right.
than having it be that amorphous we can or we can't.
I guess our thinking was that it will depend on the project. And the criteria for encouraging a work session would be, is it in the historic district? Or does it affect those dimensional parameters that Hark would be interested in? If it's just about a use, or if it's about parking, a variance or something like that, then we would say Hark isn't going to want to spend their time.
Can we spell out some of those criteria somewhere for people?
Yes, I think we certainly can.
And just putting on my developer hat, if you're bringing a really complicated project to Hark and P and Z, you want one or more work sessions. You're wasting your time and money if you just plunge in with your conceptual or preliminary level. The more work sessions you can get, the better your project will flow usually. So hopefully the applicants will all understand the value of requesting a work session when needed. Not for a new front door, but for a large scale.
And we
scale thing.
encourage them for large, difficult projects,
Yeah.
for sure. We may have two, so.
Yeah. Oh, Piper, can you tell me if Angela wants to speak? Because I can't see her now that this is on the screen.
She has taken herself off video, but I will ask her to unmute and restart her video.
Or just tell me if she's raised her hand.
Oh, I will. She has not raised, she has unmuted now.
I'm here.
Thanks, good. You don't have to ask your question. All right, well, I think we're done with this
Anything
slide.
done on this item?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that feedback. So this is not a code amendment, but more informational. You don't have to agree on it.
Oh, we
It's-
can.
Yeah, it's a raise for everyone on Hark and P and Z. Currently, all Hark and P and Z members get a stipend of $150 per month. That's been proposed to be increased to $300 per month for members and $450 per month for the chairs and vice chairs of
They should have
both
been more.
boards.
Yeah. Signed up,
Sorry.
been a little more of an advocate
Yes.
about.
And really, this is not uncommon in a lot of communities. Here in Telluride, town council really wants to give everyone a raise because they really appreciate the work and time that all of the boards put in. It's just a way to acknowledge that and show appreciation for the efforts that you make. It's incredible that you all take it very seriously. You all show up, you all do your homework, and spend a lot of time doing this. So that was part of this package, but nothing for you to really.
We can say we appreciate it.
If you,
We certainly
appreciate the
do. That's
gesture.
amazing. Wow.
I know some members might not care about it. That's okay. I mean, you can do whatever you want with it, donate it, whatever. It's up to you. But I think that will take effect the first of the year.
I'll just say Glider Bob back in his day donated his stipend on town council back to the town to use for other programs. So
Right.
that's an option.
It's a personal choice. But again, it's just a show of appreciation from council and the town for the time that's spent on these boards. So moving on to the real kind of heart of these changes, I'll just go over kind of existing types of Hark applications. We have, similar to P&Z, we have large scale applications which require a two-step Hark board review process, preliminary and final. There's small scale review, which requires only a final review by the Hark board, one review. Minor scale, which requires review only by the Hark chairperson, and substantial review, which requires review only by staff. And then we added a determination of no effect, which is only applied outside the historic district on those things that don't have any effect on the appearance. It's really kind of changing out a vent or a door or windows or things on non-historic buildings. And we don't charge a fee or issue a certificate of appropriateness, but we do review it to make sure that it's all compliant. So right now, there's nothing really to read on this slide except that it's just to illustrate those four kind of main buckets of application types: large, small, minor, and insubstantial. Only two of the categories, small and minor scale, distinguish between inside and outside the historic district under new construction. There's nowhere else in our categories that differentiate what happens in and outside of the historic district. So part of the proposal to restructure this section of the code is to distinguish between those projects that are inside and outside the historic district. So we would actually start with two buckets. One, again, would be inside, broken down by zone districts, all of the residential zone districts, and then all of the commercial zone districts. And those would be broken down into large, small, minor, and insubstantial. Same for outside the historic districts. Again, broken down by residential zone districts, commercial zone districts, and then the scale. And then there's a third category, which I'll explain in more detail in a little bit, but that is a category that encompasses everywhere in town in all zone districts, in and outside the historic district. And those really are essentially things that happen everywhere in town that staff usually take care of, like fences and signs and CA amendments and things like that. So that's the first goal of this kind of redo. The second goal of our revisions is to change some of the current classifications, or sorry, the thresholds of some of our applications. So right now, for example, in the residential zone districts, small scale new construction is between 750 and 2,500 square feet. We propose to bump up that minimum threshold to 950 square feet. Same for minor scale new construction, which now is under 750 square feet. That would be under 950 square feet. And really, this is tying it to a specific maximum size of an accessory structure that could be built on the largest lot in town. That it seems to make sense to tie it to something specific rather than something that really is just kind of pulled out of the ether, I think. And similarly, in the commercial zone districts, we would up the threshold for small scale new construction and minor scale new construction to 2,000 from 1,500. The upper level thresholds are not changing. So anything over those thresholds would be large scale. The large scale categories are not changing. So again, a couple more examples of applications that would move down in scale. So in the residential zone districts, large scale application or large scale additions to existing buildings could become small scale additions if they're outside the historic district. If they're inside the historic district, it stays the same as it is now. Same for small scale additions. Those would become minor scale additions outside the historic district, and existing minor scale additions would become insubstantial additions if they're outside the historic district or if they're on non-rated structures in the historic district. And one more slide of examples. These are examples of items that are currently minor scale activities reviewed by the chair that are proposed to become staff level reviews in all zone districts. This is that third bucket I talked about. Right now, the chair reviews all wireless telecom facilities. This means anytime a cell tower is changed out on the Elks building, it has to go to the chairperson. Relocation of a non-designated secondary structure, which is a shed, a non-historic shed relocation happens very rarely, but again, no historic resources involved. And insignificant alterations to a designated structure and alterations to non-historic portions of a designated historic structure that don't increase floor area. This would be something like on a newer addition of a historic structure, again, replacing a door or non-historic windows or something like that. It's not affecting historic material. If it did affect historic material, it would still go to the chairperson.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
Just like the chair can always refer something to the full committee, can the staff, if somebody comes in and says this is insubstantial, and the staff goes, no, we want this to go to the chair.
Absolutely. That applies to every category, every scale of application. The director or the chair can elevate the application to the next level up. And that will still apply with these revisions. I've also included a sentence in the revisions that says that any project that, we haven't anticipated that doesn't seem to fit in any of these categories will be decided by the director. So, yeah. Okay.
I think all of this is great, what you just showed us, the switching them to staff and switching the sizes from 750 to 9
Right.
and all of that. So I think if anybody on the board doesn't want that, we should quickly tell Jonna,
Everybody seems fine.
or everybody's like,
Right.
hold our thumbs up.
Okay, super. Great. So just a couple of other things that are triggered by these changes that we need to think about. The first one is that the chairperson will be reviewing more applications, likely, or little bit larger applications. One recommendation, because of that additional responsibility and power of the HARP chair, one suggestion was to rotate between the chair and vice chair, maybe every other month, or stagger their reviews so that one person isn't taking the burden of all of those reviews. We proposed maybe having a small committee of the chair and the vice chair to work together on those items. HARP was not in favor of that. They felt like that was an inconvenience and unnecessary. And again, those things that were of concern could be elevated. So they, their preference was to have the chair or the vice chair review them as they do now.
So right now, the vice chair sometimes reviews things.
Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes you have a conflict as either the chair or the vice chair and the other person has to do it, or if both people are out of town.
Yes.
Then just another P and Z member
Correct.
can do it, or sign plats as necessary. So
Exactly.
I think that's all fine.
However they want to handle it.
Angela's got her hand up.
Oh, Angela. I can't hear her.
But she's muted.
You're
There we
mute.
are. Yep.
Yep.
I just wanted to say, I think these are appropriate, and we have safety valves basically to elevate things in either direction, frankly, from either coming from staff or coming from our volunteer groups. And I think that that's very essential. Oftentimes this sort of thing occurs when you don't necessarily trust staff or you have inexperienced staff. I think we are in solid.
Something.
Oh,
So we're on solid.
Okay,
Yeah,
solid.
we're solid. We're solid.
sure she was gonna say something nice.
He did.
Solid ground, yeah,
He did.
with our staff, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. So,
Got a question.
Yes.
I know, all right, so the chair or vice chair can elevate something or staff. Can we as individuals also ask for something to be elevated if we as individual members want something to be elevated?
You can ask, but I think we have to leave it up to the, I mean, if it's
Okay.
HARP matter, we have to leave it up to them.
But I guess, but a HARC member, I mean, other than the chair. I
the
mean,
code is specific to the chair and the
Okay.
director. Yeah. Yeah. And
Sorry
so,
about that.
oh, she's back.
Yeah, I'm back. I just wanted to say, tying it to a specific reference in the land use code makes it also a very solid legal reference and rationale. So thank you for recognizing that kind of situation. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, thanks, Angela.
So the final issue to consider is that currently for small scale applications, for example, for new houses in the residential zone districts, neighbors would receive a letter in the mail in addition to a sign being posted on the property as public notice for that project. If some of these applications that are currently small scale get demoted to minor scale, the requirement for minor scale applications is just a sign. No letters are required. To keep the neighborhoods informed, we're proposing to revise our noticing requirements to require letters be sent for minor scale applications for new construction and additions of a certain size or greater. And I think we're leaning towards 950 square feet or greater. That would, those would be the projects that will impact the neighborhood the most. And I think people would expect to be notified by mail about those.
Kevin.
I have a neighbor who came and talked to me today about a project that's been approved. I think it's even been vested. He's right next door. It was about an addition of 720 square feet. And he didn't know anything about it until now. And he's not happy. And I don't know if he's hiring lawyers or what. But if anything, I think we need to do more notices, like the written notices going out to the neighbors and the signs, not less. I would put that at like 10 square feet, you know, if you're doing anything, because it's really, you know, a real problem. And I'm not sure that we've gotten the new construction mitigation noticing at the right level either, because in my neighborhood of 1-lane streets, you know, people 200 feet away, 300 feet away can't move. And they're never noticed in advance to get their car out or whatever. So I think with all the activity, we need to be doing more noticing, not less.
And that's what this item would propose.
Okay.
This would be requiring noticing for minor scale applications, which we don't currently require.
That would help. But I mean, that's the biggest complaint I get in my neighborhood is like, we didn't know. And I was like,
And-
oh, you just need to go read the Hark and PZ agenda each month for fun and then figure out what you need to follow up on. And they're
Some
like,
people
oh,
don't
is she?
even know to do that. And I realize even the letters get missed because people travel or they have multiple homes or, you know, they don't get their mail regularly or they have a business manager, whatever. So even the letters get missed and we hear from people who we know got letters, but still didn't know about a project. So it happens frequently.
Well, noticing is relatively inexpensive and it provides certainly a legal backstop to the town. Say, we sent you a letter, you didn't read it, you got it.
We've also enhanced our online noticing. I don't know if any of you have seen that on our website, but all of the public notices with photos and a map are on our website. So now when we prepare the letter, there's a QR code on it. And if you scan the QR code, it will take you to the public notice on the website. So the QR code is on the letter and the sign. It's more information. So we are trying to do more, not less. And this is a good example.
Yeah, and I'm a Luddite. I had trouble today getting to the old, eventually I got to the old Hark agendas. I could pull up the report and forward it from, you know, from 2 months ago, 3 months ago and forward it to my neighbor and say, this is what's proposed. And this is, you know, what's been approved and probably fully vested, but this is, so you can review this and go talk to Jonna if you want to, you know. So I just think making it easier, because when I typed in at one point, I typed in current building permits and it didn't bring up current building permits in the search. The search could be, the new website's great, it loads fast, I love that. But the search function, when I type in words I think are making sense and I get something about the ice hockey schedule, I'm trying to find building permits, I'm like, what? You know, this is crazy, you know.
So that's the bird's eye view. I am getting the sense you don't want to go through the red lines. If you do, I have them here in the presentation, and it is It is you tell me what you would like to do and how much you would like to.
Does anybody have any questions that are at the level of the red line?
I didn't, I read them, they seemed logical.
I had one, but let's hold this and go to Todd.
Well, I think, as we have said before, this is in the right direction. It is appropriate for our greater level of competency in staff and trying to reduce some of the crazy load on Hart. It's all in the right direction. Consistent with what we're doing and visioning. What the discussion we just had about noticing is that connected community. So yes, you are doing a whole lot more than we ever used to, and it's still not enough. So we just keep pushing it further and further.
Anybody else? Comments, questions? I had one short question. I couldn't figure out in the red line. What happens to a structure of significance, like a rated structure when it gets moved? I couldn't figure out what had happened to that in the red line.
That stays the same. The repositionings are still small scale. None of that changes.
Okay. I just couldn't match the red line. Great. Thank you,
Okay.
John.
You've done an amazing job,
Thank you.
and I'm looking forward to it.
I don't know if you want to take public comment, but we have a hand raised.
Okay.
Oh, it's still the work session. Yes, go ahead. Public comment. I'm sorry, I don't know who it is.
Dave Down.
Oh, Dave, would you like to comment?
I've asked him to unmute.
Hopefully I'm unmuted now.
Yep.
Yeah, hopefully I'm able to make some public comment now because during both town council work sessions and the Harkwood last night, wasn't able to make it. So I'd like to, at least get my input in on here because it's a big thing, and that's also part of town transparency. So please bear with me. I've only got like 3 or 4 items that are hoping to get through quickly. The first one has to do with the reviews and recommendation between joint Hark and P&Z. And I did a lot of those over the years from the Hark point of view. And work sessions always help. They are really big, especially if you're talking large scale things. And what I found they help clarify is they highlight the issues that would be of concern to Hark, at least, of incongruities and other issues, with the Hark standards and the exceptions and modifications, so they can work together a little more seamlessly, and also give the public comment, the neighbors and other concerned public. But if they can work out at least a little of those, a lot of that has to do with like view corridors. And when it comes to like parking, not a Hark issue, but when it comes to entrances and alleys and setbacks, then it is a Hark issue. So that's where you get those. You might as well work out those to the best of the ability. Like Kathy said, for the people who have that hat on and they save money and works better. The other notes I had on here, one was right now the chair or the director can call one up and bump it up to the full board. And I'm just wondering if maybe not a single member of, say, Hark, but if you get 3 or more members and say, hey, this one we know is might have some issues, can we bump that particular one up? Probably very rare, but for the rest of the board to go over and you have enough members to say, hey, we think the full board should look at this. They should have the ability with like 3 members or more doing that. And then the third would be when it comes to demolitions. And it says rated structures, and I'm not sure whether they're saying that's just contributing or supporting, but what about the ones with qualifications? Anytime you have one with qualifications and it's looking at demolition or relocation, it needs more than just the responsibility falling on Hark or staff. And that should be a full board one. That's where you need all 7 members for their input. It makes a big difference. If it's just whoever that particular one was at the time, and we don't know in the future, this is for long into the future, is that's a big thing to put on there. And we've seen a lot of structures get bumped up from with qualifications to supporting, and now we have a resource that's historic that is contributing to the district. That's happened so many times over the last, it's probably happened 6 or 8 times in the last 10 years or so. And that's where having the full board do it. It's going to be rare. There aren't that many, but it should rise to that level to at least have a full board consideration. So I think that's all we're looking at on that one. Oh, and the challenges to the designation. That's the other one I see in 203A1B. Anytime you have a challenge to a structure listed in the 2013 architectural survey, again, a full board decision. Let's get some input, full members. That's the value of having a full board membership, having their input, not the particular personality of the day who happens to have that ability. So thanks so much. Appreciate the comments.
Thank you, Dave.
Otherwise, everything else is looking pretty good for making things work well with the process.
Johnny, did you want to clarify any of those points?
Sure, happy to. So demolitions and relocations of rated structures are large scale applications. That is not changing. Challenges to a rating are small scale applications, and those are not changing. Those are all staying the same as they are now.
Thanks. Does anybody?
I just had a comment. I would think if the chairperson or the director received 2 or 3 members of a board saying, we want this to get bumped up, they would do it. And let's not try to rewrite that part of the charter or whatever to change that. And that's kind of a special power that town council has, that they can, get a certain number of people and call something up or change something. But I don't think either of the quasi judicial review boards need that, because I think that either the director or the chairperson would respond to that request very quickly and in their favor and their.
I can't imagine that they wouldn't. Anyway, so any other comments about this matter or for John? Questions? No? All right. Thank you so much. That was really great to hear about.
We'll see you again next month.
Okay. We'd love to see you whenever it's ready.
Thank you.
As long as you don't stay up all night doing it. Yeah.
No.
All right. So let's proceed to our public hearing item. This is the Phoenix Market PUD and parking payment in lieu, continued from August 29th, 2022. Review by the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding a preliminary small-scale PUD requesting 2 PUD variations pursuant to Land Use Code Article 6, Division 3, including the following variations. 1, an increase in height from 35 feet to a maximum height of 39.5 feet. And 2, a 50% reduction in the amount of parking required for this project. The applicant is requesting to provide 3 parking spaces where 5 are required, and a request for a payment in lieu of 2 parking spaces. Legal description, lot 29, block 3, Town of Telluride, according to the plat recorded September 6, 1883, in Plat Book 28, page 1, address 221 West Colorado Avenue, Zone District Historic Commercial, owner New Sheridan Restaurants LLC. The applicant is Ray Farnsworth, manager of New Sheridan Restaurants LLC, and our staff member is Phil Taylor. Phil, please take it away.
Great. There we go. Okay, great. Thank you for that introduction. As stated, this was a case that was continued from the Planning Commission hearing on August 29th. I'm going to mainly highlight the changes that have occurred since the last meeting. I know the applicants are sort of excited to talk about the changes, but it's important to note that staff's recommendation has not changed. It's the same that it was in August as it is today. So again, the specific requests through the PUD process have not changed. They're asking for an increase in height to 39.5 feet and a 50% reduction in parking. The applicants are also still asking for a payment in lieu of 2 parking spaces. As you will see from their updated site plan, they're really looking to pay out 1 at this point. So the proposal has changed slightly since August. The applicants are now proposing 2 accommodations using for visitors instead of 3. The 2 housing units that were proposed are still there, and they are now providing 2 parking spaces on site instead of 1. The uses that were mentioned remain the same. They're still going to have ground floor commercial, which is required by the land use code. The accommodation units and the bathrooms and the storage have been reduced in square footage a little bit, and the affordable housing has been bumped up a little bit, primarily due to the circulation and redesigning of the plans. A main thing that I wanted to point out that was changed since the last review is the 2 parking spaces that you can see here. These are technically land use code compliant spaces. They meet the dimensional requirements for parking spaces in the land use code. And prior to this, they were showing 1 space, and now they're showing 2. The PUD public benefits being offered have not changed. The applicants are still providing affordable housing on site above what's required, and they're proposing short-term accommodations for visitors. So the 2 standards for public benefits are the same as the last meeting. I did want to talk briefly about the public benefits being provided. One of the housing units is still being proposed below grade. So the requirement to go in front of the Target Housing Authority for an exception still remains, and it is still a condition of approval. The other PUD public benefit that has been revised slightly is the configuration of one of the hotel rooms or accommodation units. What you can see here is the floor plan for one of the floors of a 2-story accommodations unit. And the total square footage would be above 1,600 square feet for 1 unit. And it's really going to be up to commission members to weigh that public benefit. It still meets the standard for public benefit. It's not the same number of units, but just a reconfiguration. And here's that top floor, as you can see here. So here is the list of PUD review standards used to review all PUD applications. Staff did not have a ton of concerns with the review standards here. Our main sticking point was the parking. Our requests for increase in parking has been met since the last meeting. So we do not have a ton of concerns about these PUD review standards. We think this proposal does meet these. Just a bit of a recap, we did receive 4 public comments on this. We have not received any new comments since the last hearing. All of these comments were addressed in the last meeting. And again, we haven't received any new comments. So just to summarize, this PUD does meet the review criteria in 6313. 2 public benefits are being offered that have been slightly changed since the last review. 2 accommodation units are being proposed, and approximately 1,000 square feet of deed restricted housing, which is well in excess of the 158 that would be required. The 50% reduction in parking is a bit concerning, but we do believe that the parking on site really increases the benefits being offered. And then just briefly, I'm going to touch on the payment in lieu application. Here's the site plan again, showing 2 parking spaces on site. And here is a table that shows the required parking for this project, 5 total. These are the review standards for payments in lieu of parking. Staff have concluded that their request meets 2 of them. There is a historic structure on site that could be adversely affected if parking for all uses is on site, and the subject property is in close proximity to parking and transportation routes. So again, this proposal meets 2 of the review standards seen here, 11482 and 11483. And we are now at the proposed motions. These are the same motions that are in the staff report. These motions have only changed slightly since the last hearing. Again, the PUD variations have not been changed. The only thing that has slightly changed is the conditions. Now they're proposing 2 accommodations units. So a public benefit now states 2 accommodations units instead of 3, which was in the last report. It also is required to provide 1,006 square feet of deed restricted housing, where the last one said approximately 997. And then again, the condition to provide parking is still on site. I'm happy to answer any questions, but here is the motion for the payment in lieu. Again, we're proposing one parking buyout, not two, with the conditions seen here. Thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions? Phil?
I got a question.
Yes.
Just in your summary, you say staff is, or I guess you say, the parking is within the dimensional requirements, but then you go on to say staff is concerned that the combination of the two parking spaces and the required emergency egress cannot successfully fit within the designated area.
It seems tight when you look at that site plan.
Yeah. But is it, I guess, the egress area is within, I don't know if there's a code that
Fire
says it has
code.
to be a certain width.
Must be the fire code.
I
fire code.
think the site plan shows the 3 foot of unobstructed egress into the parking area. I think the building department had some questions about 3 doors entering or exiting onto one landing. I think the applicants speak to that. I think they're talking daily with their code consultants in the building department about that. But I think there's definitely still some questions about how it will all meet building code.
Okay. But as far as our land use code, the parking spaces are
They're showing
of the
to
proper size, and
correct.
if somebody puts a full-size car there, that's their issue and not, we're not.
Might be their neighbor's issue.
Yeah,
Correct. We can't really say at this time how the parking will operate.
All right, thank you, Phil. Let's hear from the applicant. The applicant is on Zoom, I guess.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris Hawkins with Alpine Planning. Thank you so much for considering this again this evening. We fully agree with the staff recommendation, and we're really here to answer any questions you might have regarding the PUD. So thank you very much.
Well, why don't you start by answering questions about the parking spaces and the egress? Do the news parking spaces and the egress comply with the building code, fire code, and other applicable safety codes?
I'll defer to Sherry on that as a project architect.
Yes, I reversed the door swing. It's extremely tight. We only have an extra 2 inches beyond the 2 8-foot wide parking spots. So the detailing of that door frame will need to be careful to make sure that we maintain 3 feet clear once you open the door to get out, but it is compliant.
Does anybody have any other questions for the applicant?
I have comments, but I don't have questions.
Well, it looks like we don't have any questions for the applicant, so let's proceed to discussion. Kathy, you have a comment?
Check for public
Oh,
comment.
I'm sorry. Are there public still on the phone?
There are.
Oh, sorry. Is there any public comment? And I can't see them. It's hard to remember their
I
name.
see that.
Thank you, Piper. All right, let's proceed to discussion, Kathy.
The reason the town parking spaces are 8 feet wide, like county is, I think, 9, other places are 10 feet wide, is so we could fit 3 on our standard 25-foot wide lot. So when we made the size for our parking spaces, we did them so that you could get 2 or 3 cars and still get to the house in front of the outside parking, whatever. So, and I definitely concur that we should maybe think about a small car parking or compact car. I was laughing about electric vehicles. There's a Rivian, what's that? Rivian in my neighborhood, and that truck is as big as a Ram Charger, and it's all electric. It costs way more than a Ram Charger. But anyway, so I love the idea that these would become smaller parking spaces. Then I also know from all my rental units, you can draw the parking lines even smaller and make them force their cars, however big or little they are, into a tinier space, and then have it a more gracious, easier entrance for the people entering the room. So I don't find any problems with this, as long as it meets codes. And with a lot of care, you can make a 2-inch, you can make it work. You can get the doors in there. They might have to try a few times, but they can do that. Yeah, something, yeah. So I was very happy with the changes. I hear from friends that are more involved in rentals than I am, short-term rentals, that people want larger units. So I think the 4-bedroom unit might be really desirable. Personally, I'd rather see a 1,600-foot rental unit where you have it rather than 3 blocks up the street on Gregory, just because of the impact. So I think that's really filling a niche we need. It's the same number of beds. The employee units are virtually the same. You could make that upstairs employee unit have a bigger closet. They'd love you forever if you made the closet a little bigger. But I had a lot of concerns last time, and I feel like they've been met.
Other comments, Todd?
Yeah, same as Kathy. I think you listened to us, you took it to heart, and you complied. It's not our purview to check building codes. It's the PUD, and we've got building staff that are going to make sure that they do it right. The operational concepts and some of that we discussed, whether you require them to have smaller vehicles or you have something that they can go to some other lot, and you did it. And I'm ready to proceed with the motion.
Angela.
Yeah, just to reiterate, thank you for going back to the drawing board and addressing our comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? No? I just want to say that it's true, Todd, that we don't, the building code is not, compliance with the building code is not our purview. But on the other hand, I wouldn't want to approve a PUD that was completely impossible. And if they showed us a plan that was completely impossible, we shouldn't be approving. So I'm glad to hear that it is possible and that you guys are working carefully with the staff. And I think we all appreciate your ability to go back to the drawing board and come up with something better. Are we ready to make a motion, or do we have further discussion?
I can make a motion.
Angela?
Did you want to make them?
Oh, sorry, Angela.
I
Is that
think
okay? Zoom, or is it easier if you guys do it?
Okay, Kathy?
Okay, I move to approve this preliminary small scale planned unit development located at 221 West Colorado Avenue with the findings and conditions set forth in the staff report dated September 14th, 2022, to allow the following PUD variations, number 1 and 2, as in the memo, with the following findings and conditions, findings 1 and 2, as in the memo, and with the following conditions, 1 through 7, as in the memo. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on September 22nd, 2022, with a notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
Todd seconds.
Any discussion? No? Let's vote. All in favor, raise your hand. All right, that looks,
Angela, yes.
that's unanimous.
Thank you, everyone.
Wait,
Okay, no, we've
wait,
done
we have
one more motion.
the payment in lieu discussion.
Okay.
Kathy, go ahead.
I move to approve this request for a payment in lieu of 1 parking space pursuant to the Land Use Code Section 6-114 for the property located at 221 West Colorado Avenue with the findings and conditions set forth in the staff report of record dated September 14th, 2022. Findings number 1 is in the memo, conditions number 1 as in the memo.
Don't you have to say this motion is based and so on?
You didn't put that. Oh, I'll do it. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on September 22nd, 2022, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code. Thank you for noticing that. Okay.
I'll second.
Oh,
Okay, well, we have 2 seconds. Very great. All right, anybody, any discussion? No, all in favor?
Angela,
Unanimous.
yes.
Great. All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
That was
Thank you
great.
very much. Have a nice night.
You too.
Yes.
All right, we have, we now go on to board and staff discussion, and what, we have one thing I know I wanted to discuss, which is the brief memo we received from Design Workshop. And when Phil gets back here, we will talk Anybody need a short break? No, we're doing all right. Anybody have anything else they want to discuss while we're waiting on Phil?
I
guess,
Angela.
go ahead, Charles.
I would just on the affordable housing where we approve something and then it goes to the Affordable Housing Authority for them to actually say this is suitable. To me, that seems backwards. It seems like when it, if we've already approved it, it puts them kind of on the spot. I mean, it's either a yes or no. Whereas if
They're
they
usually the applicant.
Well,
for
in this,
affordable.
we're thinking about this example.
Yeah, this example, but, and it probably doesn't come up a whole lot. But it seems like if they had it first and they could say, we want to approve this, but we would like these things. They can't really do that because to me, it's one or the other. But if they could come to us with recommendations and say, we would like a little more light or a little more windows or a little farther above grade, we have the ability to kind of, I think, push the developer to make those changes. I don't know if that works, but just at least in this example, it seems like that would have been a better way for it to work.
Well, I'm trying to think how we could actually make that happen. So we could approve conditional on their acceptance, which in fact is what happened.
Yes.
But
I
we
guess
can also request, I guess, their input.
Yes, I guess that's what I guess.
So it's like what we're taking, allowing Hart to do less of is the review and recommendation. They would review it, recommend it to us is that this would be a lovely unit. We would love to have it, if it fits into the.
So Charles, would you like to repeat for Phil's benefit?
Okay, Ally.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in here too. So they have to go through a two-step process anytime they're going to make a proposal that goes against the affordable housing guidelines. So it's either you were going to approve conditionally or THA subcommittee was going to have to approve conditionally. They could have had possibly a work session with the THA subcommittee. So next time something like this happens, maybe Phil, this is something for you and I to think about. Maybe we recommend that they go to THA subcommittee first for a work session to get that kind of input. But either way, it was going to be conditional approval, either you first or THA subcommittee first.
Yeah, I think what Charles was saying is that it might make more sense for THA to have to weigh in first so that then we could hear how they felt about it before we approved it.
I mean, I think on this one, we did get a public comment from someone who, at least in the past, was on the Affordable Housing Authority. I don't know if that person still is, but so I guess it would just be nice to hear from that group as a whole as to what they would like to see.
Yeah, no, I think it's a process tweak we could make in the future. What do you think?
Yeah. Something that I find myself recommending applicants do is provide some drawings. They don't really need to have floor plans or architectural drawings for the PUD process. So it might get a little hard for THA to approve something or conditionally approve something if they don't have floor plans, or they may just have an idea, this might have to be below grade. A lot of times we see PUDs now that are being managed by architects. So they have plans, but I do not think PUDs require architectural elevations or floor plans. So it might get hard for THA to conditionally approve something if they don't really know how it's going to go. They have a good idea of how the circulation in the unit's going to operate. I don't know if all of them will have that level of detail.
Yeah, I guess on this one, I would not have known that was part of that. It had to all be. I knew some level of above grade. It's got for safety reasons. You got to have it, but I was not familiar with kind of their, I guess, criteria or whatever that be above grade or what counts as above grade, and it would just
Yeah, I think maybe doing it the opposite would be
Or just,
be helpful.
just a work
Yeah.
session. They
Yeah.
might not do the approval till they get the final
Sure.
plans. If they do a work session, say that we think there can be enough light and air and, you know, put in some clear story windows
Yeah.
of everything if there's room for it.
Yeah, even they just say, these are our concerns. They're not specific, but that we can then kind of
But we,
applicant a little bit on those maybe.
Yeah, I think the direction is clear enough. Is that right, Phil?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And
very-
we can,
yes.
you guys can work with this? Okay.
Yes.
Angela, I know you had something you wanted to raise.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of do a poll of the group as to whether or not we thought 6 p.m. keeping the P and Z at 6 p.m. was still good, or if we wanted to move it to 5:30. That happens to be the same time as HARC. Not that that means anything, but our agendas don't tend to be quite as long anyway. But just wanted to bring that up. I think it was referenced last time by Ron briefly. Just thought I'd.
Yeah,
throw it out
so
there.
I personally am completely indifferent to this change, but I can just see the pros and cons. The pros of starting at 6 are that people who work are more able to serve on the board because they can get here more or less on time. I'm looking at Lee Shay because she was working right up until the last minute. So it's harder if we start at 5:30. Probably not impossible, but it's harder. On the other hand, you know, staff is ending up staying around later to help us. So it's probably easier on them if we start at 5:30. Those are like conflicting. And I think it's also, you know, when I think about the commissioners, maybe this group would be fine with starting at 5:30, but I'm trying to project on like, how do we retain and recruit more input, because that's getting, you know, harder and harder. And I don't know which time is better for that. Kathy.
well, I would love to have a young person on this board. Lachey's young, but somebody else in her age range, male or female, and they're likely to work. I mean, if they have a nighttime server job, they're just going to have to get Thursdays off on certain times each month. Otherwise, you know, they're likely to be working till 5. I know that when Stacy was on our board, it was really hard for him to get here at 5:30. I think if you have small children, you need to get them settled down with their babysitter before you come. So I think in terms of recruitment, personally, I often have meetings that go later, so I'm happier with 6 and 5:30, but and I think I can stay awake all the way till 9:30. So
We'll try to have
Yeah.
meetings later than that.
yeah.
Other thoughts, Charles, Lisa?
I personally don't care either way, but I kind of feel for staff, I guess, being that it makes a very long day for them. But maybe it makes it easier for them to prepare for the meeting where if it's not at 5:30, they got an extra half an hour to get ready. I don't know.
These meetings are still shorter than HARC. So, start time. is so low.
I would say either. I in this case scheduled something at 4:30 because I knew I didn't have to do something till 6. So if I had something at 5:30, I just wouldn't have done that. So either way would work for me. So.
What do you think, Todd?
As it gets further into the winter, we're in the depths of the shadows, and it's a little bit nicer to start a little bit earlier, but the employment situation, even for staff, I mean, they're working past 5 many times. So trying to get down here at 5:30 can be a real squeeze.
Well, let's hear from, what does staff think? The staff is still present.
Staff's recommendation or desire is probably to move it up, but only because there's sort of like what I would feel is a long gap between when the office shuts down at 5 and then we start a meeting at 6. But, you know, I'm used to night meetings. It comes with the territory. So I don't have a strong preference really. And I agree that it's better to retain people. I don't know if people aren't joining the board because it starts at 6, not 5:30 or vice versa. But I think
You only get paid $150 a month.
doing more though.
Not anymore.
After January.
Yeah.
You might have a line.
Well,
but
what about trying 5:30 for a few months and seeing how it goes?
I think that'd be fine.
Yeah. right.
Do you think that should start this year still, or
What's
first-
convenient for you guys?
I may have to edit the start time on.
we can
some
talk about it?
scheduling, Yeah, but
Okay.
it's doable.
Is it a problem for applicants? I mean, do we see that that's any issue?
My inkling is no, because all the applicants here are paid design
be here.
professionals. Yes. At my last job, a lot of people were property owners representing themselves, and that was a little different thing, getting off work or taking time off. But most people here, this is their job to get to attend these meetings. So I don't think it would be that bad for the applicant.
And if we go back to our regular schedule of the past of always doing our long range planning first, that's what we would be jumping into at 5:40 after we've done minutes and roll call. And they can still, and we used to always spend about an hour, remember, on long range planning and then move to applications. So that's still going to put it that,
Applications will be later.
will be later. Yeah, we don't want to stint on our long range planning. So we try to do that first.
Well, I think as the master plan process moves along, we'll have definitely chunks of that to do. So starting at 5:30 might be helpful for everybody. So we feel like we have plenty of time to have a discussion.
Yeah, and I actually agree with Phil, like having that gap, I'll just fill it. So, shortening it, you'll just come straight here afterwards. So.
All right. So we've agreed we're going to try starting at 5:30 for a
Yep.
while and see
Yeah,
how
me
it
and
goes.
Piper will look into rescheduling the Zooms and all that stuff.
Yeah, and you can just tell us once you figure out whether it should start in October or November, or whether it needs to wait till January just because
Okay.
of all the software changes or whatever,
Sure.
notifications or whatever.
Yeah. This group apparently is pretty flexible about when we start.
Great.
Great. Now, Phil, we had the design walk memo that you.
Yep, I'm gonna give a brief vision update. And I think it would be great for the commission members that attended the retreat to tell Angela how it went, their thoughts and feelings. I think that'd be really helpful. I gave her a very brief description, but I think it would be helpful if you guys also provided some input. So we did just send updated vision statements and principles of livability and a draft table of contents to you guys for review. I met with Design Workshop earlier today. We sort of discussed the process for rolling this out, and then I sent it to you. We've asked for comments sent by email to Ron by next Thursday. It's a pretty small document, so I think it should be manageable to get the comments in. We have provided specific questions or sort of things to think about in the memo. Obviously, feel free to provide any other comments, but I think Design Workshop was looking for sort of specific input based on what we heard at the retreat and compared to what they're showing now. They want to make sure they sort of captured everything. We talked about a lot of stuff and we took a lot of notes. So we're hoping, and I'm pretty confident that we kind of captured most of the thoughts and feelings from the retreat. Just a little update that I think is also in the memo we sent. Following the comments that we provide, Design Workshop will amend the vision statements and principles and then work on having a draft vision plan for you guys to review for the October Planning Commission meeting. So
I hope that means like a week before.
I do too.
So we can actually read it.
I do too. They're going to be at the meeting
2
in
hours.
October.
Yeah.
I mean, these were not sent today to discuss today.
I understand.
So,
Yeah.
but yes, they are going to get a draft plan for review in October. If they don't get it in time for the Planning Commission in October, we'll discuss it at a later date. But they are planning on attending the meeting in October to talk to you guys about it, address any comments or concerns.
Great. So I hope we have plenty of time on our agenda for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have 2 items so far, but we can always add more. I think the 2 items should go pretty quick in October.
Okay, good.
So yeah, if you guys want to discuss,
And we can have a waiting list like Hark. If we need to program
Mm-hmm.
2 hours for the vision statement and then just do 2 projects, the other projects can go to November. There's-
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, so far we only have 2 items.
Yeah.
And the noticing for that pretty much starts October 10th. So it's going to be surprising if we get another application between now and then.
Okay.
So if you guys want to discuss the document that we sent, we can, or whatever you want.
Well, I think we can discuss it now if people have thoughts, just to kind of kick it around a little bit here. Not to preclude, I mean, if people have comments now, this doesn't mean you don't put them in writing and send them to Ron.
Yes.
So, Todd?
What I told Phil and I were talking about it a little bit before the meeting. I'm pretty happy that they captured the things that we talked about, both through the survey and during our retreat. There's a lot of specific words that I'm going to recommend we change because I don't like the way they said some of the things, but they've got all the pieces there. The one thing that it doesn't get at that I think we're going to have to, and maybe it's in the core value of sustainability, but it's how big can we be? And we don't address that head on. We talk about it peripherally, like there's a place for everybody and anybody who wants to live here can find a house kind of thing, but it doesn't say we don't see ourselves growing out of the valley or putting multi-story condos in place to just keep on growing.
Well, you used a word at the retreat, which was small.
Yeah.
And I think some people had an issue with that. What did it mean? And I thought that when we discussed it, it actually meant some of these things that you not only small scale, but also sense of small town. And close knit, and intimate. And maybe we should get that word back in here to capture kind of those two things. That is, intimacy is a function of scale and how big we are. You know, we will not be the same town if we are twice the size. And so maybe we should get that word back in here.
Well, it's also a limitation, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, we get it. It's in here in infrastructure. It's in here with housing. You know, it's just it's behind the screen. It's not out there for you to look at. And I think
Maybe to
maybe
have it
we need
stated
to
more
be-
directly.
yeah,
A natural
and
barrier.
that it might go into just the vision statement.
Yeah.
I have to look at the words and think about that, but
And that we want to remain a small town.
mhm.
And then, so don't come running in here with an 8-story building thinking we're gonna give you a variance or Angela's got her hand up.
Angela.
Oh, yeah. To Todd's point, and sorry, I wasn't able to make the visioning retreat, but, and I'm looking forward to reading what everyone's comments are, but I've always thought of it in terms of capacity, just like we have mass and scale.
Yep.
We have parameters, three-dimensional parameters for building that generates capacity. So I think Todd's point is well taken. We might need to drill that down more at the comprehensive plan level, but essentially the tight-knit community, the fact that we are of a certain scale and we will never be beyond that dictates a certain capacity of population, transportation, and so that needs to be articulated.
Well, I think it needs to be, I think the view is here that you're hearing is needs to be more explicit.
Yes.
I mean, do you think if you're looking at the vision statement, do you think it's as easy as saying a livable Telluride will be a small town that embraces and sustains?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an easy.
That could just be it, yeah.
Okay.
It might be.
Yeah.
enough.
We don't need a whole lot of
I
verbiage.
think this is maybe more in the comp plan that, that we'll talk about annexations. Personally, I've always thought that Lawson Hill should annex to town, and that's the gory history we don't have to get into, but someday, the town could be all of the valley and a tiny bit beyond, but should Telluride and Mountain Village annexed to each other. No, but whatever, we need to kind of go into to some of that. And we're not going to house everybody. We don't want to be Vail or even Avon or Beaver Creek. We want to be a little hard to get to town. The one problem I had, I haven't thought this through because I read this really fast, is Telluride is the peak of authentic living in Colorado.
I was like, no, too much.
I would
mean,
encourage all
first of
you
all,
for new
it's-
taglines.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, the Peaks Hotel has got its own whole story, and it's not a name we necessarily want to attach to. And then I don't think we have to go, we're better than every other mountain town. We're different. And that's what I'm proud of,
Sure.
is that we're different, not that we're better. Everybody, each town has its own wonderful
Yeah.
attributes.
I think something like keep Telluride funky or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I think we all have the same thoughts on the tagline.
Good.
Be worked
Yeah.
up.
yeah, if we have to put in there, you can only come here if your jet airplane's small enough to land in Telluride, whatever. Yeah. Right, yeah.
Just by changing it to a pinnacle rather than the,
Yeah.
then you're not comparing. them.
Yeah. But anyway, I just
It's
thought
more of
that-
a marketing, it sounds more like a marketing tagline than it does
Yeah.
really a
Yeah,
reflection of
I
values.
really think it's more keep something, it's, we want to retain, a lot of these core values are things we want to retain.
Yep.
And so I think the tagline might start with keep Telluride something, because we're talking about sustaining our environment, sustaining our natural character, keeping our close-knit community. I mean, it's a lot of, let's keep some of the good things that we value here.
Yeah. Well, authentic, right? So keeping it authentic.
Yeah, or whatever. And yeah, and going back to the size, small capacity thing, we just need to figure out how many people need to live here full-time in housing. And it's both deed restricted affordable housing or whatever we want to call it, workforce housing, but it's also people that live here and work, or people that live here and volunteer. We need that core community. And then what does that leave for the rental market? We've got to have the base population goes in, and then what's not consumed that can be physically built or has been physically built can then be debated about what's rentable and what's not and how much, because we need the base, and the roads close, even with our fancier, newer roads, the roads close, and that's the day you're really glad that a lot of your employees can walk to work. Because you've got all these visitors trapped here and no one to serve them breakfast. Whoa, that's a nightmare when that happens.
So what other types of questions did you want us to answer, Phil? I'm sorry, I think we've been
Well, I think
just saying what we felt.
that's fine. I think in the actual memo, they sent a couple questions that said, are the statements included generally reflective of the consensus from the retreat? Is there anything you think is missing?
I think we
That's the
just
first
discussed
one.
that.
Yes. And then what specific comments or edits, if any, do you have?
Well, we talked about the taglines, and I'm sure we all have different words that we have negative reactions.
I would just, the one that's housing solutions, and I think they've added, we strive to be. But, I felt like at the kind of the public meeting at the transfer warehouse, a lot of people saw where it says housing for all who choose to call Telluride home. People saw that and they were just like, that's not possible. I mean, we want to strive to get as many people to live in town as we can, but I think people really took offense that we were saying housing for all.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's a little bit of an
same thing.
overstatement. Yeah.
Well, it's not achievable.
Yeah, it's adequate worker housing.
Yeah, and we were, for Angela's listening pleasure, we kicked that around a lot in the retreat. And
Your
I thought we
table?
had some different words around it than
I think we did. I think there was
for
some.
all who choose.
You have to go
be.
back to your notes.
Something about, yeah.
Yeah, because there was that reaction at the retreat. By the way, Angela, the retreat was completely amazing. And I feel, I left there and I felt like, wow, what a great town where people would come together and spend the whole day doing this. And
Well, it helped from what I understand that there wasn't any internet or phone or
Yeah,
whatever.
that was
And
really
everybody
helpful.
was trapped and they were focused. So that sounds great.
It was really great. We should have the internet go out often.
I think that
Well, and
just
we
close
had,
the doors and yeah, I think it was
we had
wonderful.
representatives from the ski company, from
Real estate
real
folks.
estate.
I mean, there
Housing.
were really, it was a good cross-section of the community, and I would commend Ron and you, Phil, for pulling that together and getting everybody to come, which is like
Hardest
probably,
part.
probably a lot of work to get some of those folks to show up and spend the day doing that. But it was really quite remarkable, and I think that we had some really intense and good discussions. People did not all agree, even by the end, but we kind of, there was a sort of core that we agreed on, I would say. And this, I think Todd is right, that this generally reflects most of it, although not, we've talked about some of the things that we think might be better reflective of what we actually felt.
I was actually surprised after the transfer meeting. It felt a lot of tension, and you know, there's different attendees there, but how positive the retreat was, and how I think it maybe started off where people thought it was going to be kind of a little bit more contentious. And I think people were surprised at the end how congruent everybody really felt and how positive it was. So I thought that was good.
Yeah. Anybody have any other thoughts that they want to share now or with each other? Great. All right. Does that help you, Phil? And we'll all provide written comments.
Does, yeah, and I have a feeling I will send this portion of the meeting to design workshop so they can hear it. That's gonna be easier than me synthesizing my notes, you know, so, yeah.
I have no idea of what the word peaks means. No, you're right.
All right. Is there anything else that that people want to discuss this evening? No. All right. So it is 7:25, and I adjourn this meeting by unanimous consent.
Next time it'll be 6:55.
Yeah.
All right, we'll start earlier.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Angela.